What's going on, everybody? It's Joel here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Liu Xiaojun Wisdom Squat Rack. This rack has been in my garage for maybe like the last 2 months or so. It replaced the Colorado Strength rack that was in here for the majority of 2020, which that was a hard act to follow. That was a really nice squat rack, and I think for the most part, the Liu Xiaojun Wisdom rack is okay. It did a good enough job. I can't really complain about it as far as like performance goes, but there are some things that I do not like about it, and there's things that I do like about it. So in this video, I'm gonna go over some of the stuff and quirks and features about the Liu Xiaojun squat rack, and I'm gonna tell you exactly what I like about it, what I don't like about it, and what I think needs a little bit of help with, and if I think the overall value for the squat rack is okay. It is priced a little bit lower than some of the other counterparts, and I'm gonna be real honest with you guys right now. I think it could be priced a little bit lower than that. But I think as a piece of fitness equipment, it's not so bad. So let me get behind the camera. I'm gonna show you the dimensions, the construction, and build quality of the Liu Xiaojun Wisdom Squat Rack. Alrighty, back behind the camera, and there it is, the Wisdom Squat Rack. Sorry for the mess in my garage right now. I have an abundance of like equipment that I need to do reviews on. So I can, start moving some of this stuff out. But as it stands, the Liu Xiaojun squat rack is 49 by 48 inches. Footprint is pretty much similar to all of the other squat racks in this style. It's pretty much a 4x4 footprint. The base is a 2x3 12 gauge steel. So I didn't actually know that was a 12 gauge steel until I looked at the spec sheet. I don't think anyone's really going to notice that. The complete height of the squat rack is 92 inches. So the base is that 2 inches, and then the upright itself is 90 inches. And then the uprights are 3x3 11 gauge steel. So that's pretty much the standard there. It's got a powder coating to it, which is not actually all that bad. It has a little bit of a texture to it, not terrible. As you can see, it might not be the thickest coat of powder coating because it's rubbed off, and I'll tell you why in just a second when we talk about the J-hooks. The hardware that is included is oddly not 5/8 inch hardware. It's like a 1/2 inch hardware. So I think that is the fatal flaw of this rack. I don't understand why they didn't use 5/8 inch hardware, because the holes are 5/8 inch for like all of the attachments. They're all just 5/8 inch, but all of the hardware is not. And then another thing I don't really like about the hardware is that they use these nylon threaded nuts instead of like a lock washer. And I don't know, to me that just kind of feels a little cheapy. So I don't really like the hardware. I think that's the worst part about this rack. I didn't get the weight storage because they ran out of stock on them, and I think they are still out of stock of the weight pegs. But they basically have like a little vertical post and then 2 horizontal posts so that you can store weight on, and then there's a barbell holder there. Liu Xiaojun, little name plaque at the back there, cool little detail. One thing that I had an issue with the base of the squat rack is that I couldn't get the wobble out of it. So I built it up one time and it had a little bit of wobble, and it's somewhere in the back right part of the squat rack. I broke it all the way down, rebuilt it back up, and the wobble was still there. So I think there might be some kind of deformation to the actual steel. I don't know, it could just be the floor that I have. But with my SML2, my Colorado squat rack, I didn't have that issue. So that may be a manufacturing issue, but I will say that if there's weight holding it down, like I have, that's not an issue. The wobble kind of goes away. So taking a look at the upright, you do have 5/8 inch holes, pretty much the standard with any kind of squat rack like this. And then they are numbered, which is a nice little touch. And you have 2-inch spacing at the very bottom, and that goes up until you get some 1-inch spacing throughout the bench range. And then from there, you've got the 2-inch spacing again, pretty much all the way up the front post of the squat rack. I've never had any issues as far as like positioning my squat or my bench with the squat rack. So I can't really complain about anything there. They do exactly what I need them to do. And then throughout the sides, there are some more 5/8 inch holes. And then the pull-up bar can be mounted, I think, 88 inches off the ground. I have them mounted at the 3rd hole from the top. And for me, that's enough space, being 5'9", for me to kip without hitting my feet on the ground, or do pull-ups without hitting my feet on the ground, or toes to bar or anything like that. The pull-up bar is 1 1/4 inch, which is pretty much the standard as well. Holds chalk pretty well. It's actually a pretty grippy powder coat, and I can't really complain about it. I actually didn't mind doing pull-ups with a coated bar, which is notoriously usually pretty slick. One thing that I forgot to mention was that the complete weight of the squat rack by itself is like 203 pounds. But when you don't have weight on it, it's pretty easy to kind of slide around. I move it back and forth when I need to do like any kind of pull-ups or anything like that, or do kipping pull-ups, and it has never really been an issue. It slides around pretty easily. So now let's talk about the J-hooks, which have some good features, but they also have some bad features. So there's a really thick piece of UHMW lining on pretty much all parts of the J-hook, in the inside as well. So I really like that about these J-hooks. What I didn't like about one of them is that this little nut wasn't fully tightened, or the nut in the inside of it wasn't fully tightened. So when I went to put the J-hook on, it took off some of the powder coating on my squat rack, just because that inside nut was not fully fastened in. So if you get the squat rack, make sure that you check that and just tighten it a little bit more so that it sits a little bit more recessed with the J-hook, because it will obviously tear up your squat rack. The actual fit of the J-hooks is really nice. Otherwise, the UHMW gives it an extra little bit of protection, but even if that nut is not loose, it will still create some kind of like marks on your squat rack. But the fit of the J-hook is very tight. The build quality is pretty good. It's a really solid feeling J-hook. Now, the fatal flaw about this J-hook is that there is this little flange that sticks out a good amount from the side here. That's where the hook is welded together. And the problem about that is that you'll almost always hit that when you're doing your walkouts or walk-ins. I always hit it when I'm doing either or. And I mean, you have to really be paying attention to not hit it. When you're in the heat of the moment and you're not really thinking of that, you're almost always gonna run into it. I do it on my walkouts, my walk-ins. It's pretty much unavoidable. So I don't like that about the J-hook. I think that little flange weld, it's gotta go. It's gotta be fixed, or they gotta re-engineer that. That is also true with the spotter arms, but it's not such a big deal because you're not doing the same kind of, you know, like walkout with a spotter arm, which the actual spotter arm itself is not terrible. It's pretty nice. The odd thing about it is that it's like 2x3 tubing, when the rest of the squat rack is 3x3. Usually, you know, like on the Rogue, on some of the other spotter arms that I have, it's always a 3x3 tubing for the spotter arm. So I just don't understand why they went with a little bit lesser of a tubing. They do come with a hitch pin that you stick through here, and I'm just not using it just because of the way that I have this set up. I don't really feel the need to use it. Cool little loo detail that's laser cut into the bottom of the spotter arm. And then there are like holes. I guess you could use like band pegs to do accessory work. The UHMW lining here is also very, very thick. I really like that about it. It does have some breaks in it, which is okay. I've had some other spotter arms that just have a real long piece of plastic, and then the plastic can kind of get warped. So I actually prefer that design. These weight storage pins are not actually from Liu Xiaojun. They are the Rogue ones, and they fit on it, no problems. And you can use Rogue attachments on this squat rack, but I tried using like the dip bar on my Rogue rack, and it was a really, really tight fit because there's like that lining inside of the dip bar, and then there's going to be lining inside of the spotter arms and the J-hooks. So you can use Rogue stuff on this squat rack, but I don't think that you'll be able to use these attachments on the Rogue squat rack. Or if you do, you'll have to modify them just a little bit. Like you might need to shave off some of the UHMW lining there. So the dip bar is right back there, and it's stable. It holds very well. I mean, it's a dip bar. I don't really have too much to say about it. The powder coating is pretty much identical to the rest of the squat rack. The welds are okay. I don't think this thing's gonna fall apart. It does have that Liu logo that's on the bottom part, and then it does come with that hitch pin. When you do dips on the squat rack, I mean, the way that I do it is I do them on the inside of the squat rack, and it's always been fine. I've never had any issues with it. But there you go. That's the squat rack. Okay, so that was the full overview of the Liu Xiaojun squat rack. Now I'm gonna tell you what I think about it relative to its price. So this thing costs $450. The attachments are like, it's $160 for the spotter arms, $128 for the dip bar. Forget what the J-hooks cost, and I forget what the weight storage costs. If you buy everything together, it's $725. Like if you're looking to get a squat rack with everything, I think the only way to do it is to buy just the Liu Xiaojun Wisdom squat rack, because you get the most savings out of it. Now, if you're looking to buy a squat pull-up rack just alone, $450, you're looking at the Liu Xiaojun, you're obviously going to be looking at the Rogue as well. They're priced the same. The Rogue is $445, the Liu Xiaojun is $450. The Liu Xiaojun has free shipping, the Rogue has subsidized shipping, which makes it like $50 or so. And then you have to pay tax on top of the Rogue, and I guess that depends on where you are. In California, you definitely have to pay tax. On the Liu Xiaojun, I think you don't have to pay tax because they ship it from New Jersey. When I just checked, didn't clock in tax. So the Liu Xiaojun all in, $450. The Rogue to me is probably like $550. You're only saving $100. I think for that $100, I'd rather have the Rogue because the build quality is better, the hardware is better, you have a lifetime guarantee on it, and you have the thing that is unspoken with Rogue products, and that is that they always have insane resale value. You could buy a Rogue SML2, have it for like 5 years, probably sell it for like 50 bucks off. So this squat rack has done everything that I've needed it to do. Like, it holds up weight just fine. I've squatted up to 400 something pounds on this just fine. I've benched on it just fine. I haven't bailed on the spotter arms or anything, but I think they'll do just fine. I have no worries that, you know, it's gonna hold up, you know, inside, outside. The build quality is, for the most part, it's just fine. I've been able to kip and do all my gymnastics stuff on the squat rack just fine, but also keep in mind that with any of these squat racks, you will have to weigh it down. If you're planning on doing any kind of kipping movements, if you're doing like just normal strict pull-ups or anything like that, it's probably not gonna be a big deal. And I think for 450 bucks, it's an okay squat rack. If this thing were like 400 bucks, 350 bucks by itself, I think this would be an insane value. I think they could hit 400 bucks, and I think that would be still a really good deal for this squat rack. And I don't think that's out of line for something like this. I think that's what this is actually worth. So the final verdict with the squat rack is that I think it's a fine squat rack. It's gonna do everything that you need it to do. It's gonna hold up weights, it's not gonna break on you, it's gonna hold up just fine. Some of the attachments need a little bit of work, but they also work just fine as well. For $450, I think you can do better. I would actually just spend the extra bit of money. But if you're really strapped for cash, $450 is fine to pay. I think that they could probably shave off 50 bucks. And at $400, the squat rack would be amazing. So if you're looking to just buy the actual squat rack, pretty good deal. My personal opinion would be to spend the extra $100 and get the Rogue squat rack, but that's me, and I don't really think $100 is that much more to spend on something like that. So if you guys have any questions about the Liu Xiaojun Wisdom Squat Rack, feel free to leave them in the comment section. And as always, guys, please hit that like button, subscribe, and thanks for watching.